I noticed it first in a Kroger off route, 30 inches early October. The rice aisle had been rearranged, not restocked, rearranged. The two 0-pound bags of long grain that used to sit on the bottom shelf had been moved up to eye level. The space where they used to live was now occupied by 5-pound bags at a price per pound that was almost double. Nobody announced it. There was no sign. The shelf tag just quietly changed, and the people walking past with their carts did not notice. Most people do not memorize what a pound of rice is supposed to cost. I did not think much of it that day. I had been watching grocery prices climb for 3 years like everyone else, and I had stopped flinching. But 2 weeks later, I was in a different store in a different state, and the same thing had happened. The big bags pushed up, the small bags pushed forward, and the price structure rearranged. That the cost of stocking up had jumped without the cost of a single trip looking any different. That is when I started paying attention. That is when I started writing things down. What I am about to walk you through is 7 items, 7 foods that millions of Americans are right now buying in bulk, sealing in buckets, stacking in basements and garages and spare closets. They believe they have built a wall against whatever is coming. What I have found after months of looking at the data, reading the extension publications, tracking the USDA reports, listening to the people who actually move this food across the country, is that 4 of those 7 items will be close to worthless when the moment they were bought for actually arrives. One of them will fail in a way that almost nobody is talking about. I am going to save that one for the end. When you hear it, you are going to want to walk down to your own pantry and check. I am not predicting anything. I am telling you what I have observed. The pattern I have been watching connects every single item on this list to one quiet structural shift in how American food is grown, processed, packaged, and stored. The shift has been underway for at least a decade. It accelerated after 2020. Almost nobody in mainstream food coverage will name it. The companies that benefit from the silence are the same companies that buy the advertising that keeps those outlets running. So let me show you what I have seen, starting with the bag that sits in almost every prepper pantry in America. Number 1, white rice. The first thing I want you to understand about white rice is that the shelf life everyone quotes is real, but it comes with conditions that almost nobody meets 25 to 30 years in a sealed Mylar bag with an oxygen absorber. The University of Utah Extension Service published storage guidance years ago that specifies temperatures below 75 degrees, low humidity, and protection from light. Most of the rice being stored in American garages right now is sitting in conditions that violate at least 2 of those 3 rules every summer. A garage in Texas hits 120 degrees in July. A basement in Ohio swings from 40 inches February to 80 inches August. Each one 0-degree increase above the recommended storage temperature roughly halves the effective shelf life. So that 2 5-year promise becomes 12, then 6, then 3. But the storage problem is the smaller half of the rice problem. The larger half is what is actually in the bag. Long grain white rice in the United States is now overwhelmingly sourced from a small number of mills in Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas, and California. California production has been hammered by a decade of water restrictions. USDA data shows California rice acreage dropping by more than half during the worst drought years of the early 2020s. The rice did not disappear. It got replaced. A growing share of what sits on American shelves now is imported primarily from Thailand and India, both of which have at various points in the last 3 years imposed export restrictions to protect domestic supply. India banned non-basmati white rice exports in 2023. The ban moved markets within 48 hours. Most American shoppers never heard about it. So here is what concerned me when I started looking closer. The people stockpiling rice are assuming a stable supply line that has already broken twice in 5 years. They are storing the product in conditions that will silently degrade it before they ever open the bag. If you are going to keep rice, keep it in a climate-controlled interior space in Mylar with oxygen absorbers, in 5-gallon food-grade buckets, rotated every 3 to 5 years, regardless of what the label says. Do not assume the supply will be there to replace it. Number 2, dry beans tell an even quieter story. Dry beans are sold to the preparedness community as the perfect protein storage food. cheap, dense, calorically efficient, and supposedly good for 30 years. What the marketing leaves out is something a USDA-funded study at Brigham Young University documented years ago. Pinto beans stored for more than 8 to 10 years lose the ability to soften during cooking. They harden at the cellular level. You can boil them for 6 hours and they will still be gravel. The researchers called this the hard shell phenomenon, and it happens even under ideal storage conditions. The starch and protein are still nutritionally present. Your body cannot access them because you cannot get the bean to break down without a pressure cooker running for an hour. And even then, the texture is wrong. I talked to enough people in the bulk food world to know that this is not a secret inside the industry. It is just not something the people selling 5 0-pound bags of pintos to nervous families want to put on the label. The bean that goes into the bucket at age 1 will be a different bean at age 15. If the emergency arrives in year 20, you may be looking at a fuel and water problem you did not plan for. Pressure cooking requires fuel. Long soaking requires water you may not have. The calorie math on the wall of the pantry assumes a bean that cooks in 90 minutes. Plan for one that may take 6 hours or never soften at all. If you keep beans, rotate them aggressively. Buy in quantities you will actually eat in 3 to 5 years. Learn to sprout them, because sprouting bypasses the hard shell problem entirely and adds vitamin content the dry bean does not have. If you want a true long-term protein storage solution, look at freeze-dried meat and dairy in number 10 cans from manufacturers who publish their oxygen residual testing. The bean bucket is not what you think it is. Number 3, flour is where the story gets worse. White all-purpose flour has a shelf life most people overestimate by a factor of 10. Sealed in its original paper bag, in a pantry, flour is good for about 1 year. The fats in the wheat oxidize. The flour develops an off taste that bakers describe as cardboard or crayon. Sealed in mylar with oxygen absorbers, you can extend that to maybe 10 years. But you have lost most of the nutritional value of the original grain because white flour has already had the bran and germ removed. You are storing starch. The grain itself, hard red wheat or hard white wheat in berry form, will store for 30 years or longer under the same mylar conditions. It retains the full nutritional profile because the protective bran is still wrapped around it. The people buying flour by the 50-pound sack are storing the worst possible form of wheat for long-term security. They have stripped out the nutrition, accelerated the oxidation, and paid more per calorie than they would have paid for whole berries. The only reason flour got into the preparedness pantry instead of wheat berries is that flour is what people recognize from their kitchens. If you are going to store wheat, store the berry. Buy a hand crank grain mill. The Country Living Mill and the Wonder Mill Junior are the two names that come up consistently from people who have actually used them for years. Grind what you need the day you bake. The bread you produce will be denser and more nutritious than anything you have made from a bag. And the storage life of your input has just multiplied by 3. Number 4, pasta is sold with promises that the chemistry does not support. Dried pasta is marketed as a 25 or 30-year storage food. Like rice, the claim is technically possible under perfect conditions and rarely true under real ones. Pasta is made from semolina flour, which contains the same wheat fats that make all-purpose flour go rancid. The fats are more protected in the dense extruded shape, but they are still there. After about 8 years, even in good storage, the pasta begins to develop a stale flavor that gets stronger every year. By year 15, it cooks soft but tastes like the box it came in. There is a second problem that almost nobody mentions. Pasta is brittle. The shapes most people store, spaghetti, penne, rotini, fracture into powder when buckets get moved, dropped, or stacked. A bucket of pasta that has been sitting under 3 other buckets for 6 years is now a bucket of pasta dust mixed with broken shards. You can still eat it. It will not be the meal you pictured. The volume per calorie of pasta is also poor compared to rice or wheat berries. A 5-gallon bucket of penne holds maybe 20 pounds. The same bucket holds 35 pounds of rice or 40 pounds of wheat. You are paying for air. If you love pasta and want it in your storage, keep a working rotation of 2 or 3 years in original packaging in a cool, dry place. Stop pretending it is a 30-year food. The calories are better stored as the grain that makes the pasta. Number 5. Sugar is where the pattern under all of this finally came into focus. Sugar is the one item in the preparedness pantry that genuinely does store indefinitely. White granulated sugar in a sealed container, kept dry, will last as long as you need it to. The problem is not the sugar. The problem is what people think sugar is for. In the preparedness mindset, sugar is calories, sugar is barter, sugar is a way to make bad food taste like food. All of that is true for the first 90 days of an emergency. After that, sugar becomes a metabolic liability. In a scenario where physical labor goes up and food variety goes down, a diet leaning on stored sugar accelerates the very health problems that make survival harder. Blood sugar volatility, immune suppression, dental decay in a world where dental care has gotten harder to access. I want to pause here because this is where the deeper pattern lives. Every item I have walked you through so far has the same structural problem, and it is not really about the food. It is about a model of preparedness that was sold to American households starting in the late 1990s by companies that needed product to move. The original Mormon storage guidance, which goes back to the 1930s and was refined through the post-war decades, emphasized whole grains, legumes rotated annually, and home gardening. It was a system. The commercial preparedness industry that grew up around Y2K stripped that system down to the products that were easiest to bulk package and ship. Rice in bags, beans in buckets, flour in pails, sugar in sacks. The system became a product line, and the product line lost the part of the original guidance that made it work. You can see the same pattern in wartime food programs. During the Second World War, the USDA's Victory Garden campaign, the home canning programs that came with it produced an estimated 40% of the fresh vegetables consumed in American households by 1944. That number is in the Department of Agriculture's own retrospective publications. The preparedness of that generation was not a wall of buckets. It was a working kitchen, a working garden, and a working knowledge of how to preserve what came out of it. The bucket pantry is a ghost of a system that used to be alive. That is the structural shift I mentioned at the beginning. The reason mainstream food coverage will not name it is that the companies selling the buckets are the same companies advertising on the platforms that would cover it. The regulators who could publish clearer guidance on long-term food storage have no incentive to undercut a private industry that lobbies steadily and quietly. So the story stays out of the news cycle and the buckets keep selling. The people buying them believe they are doing the right thing because nobody has told them otherwise. Number 6, cooking oil is where the timeline gets short and the consequences get real. Vegetable oil, canola oil, soybean oil, the oils that fill most American pantries, have a shelf life of about 1 year unopened and 3 to 6 months once opened. After that, the oxidation that produces rancidity is already underway. Rancid oil is not just unpleasant, it contains compounds that are inflammatory and, in long-term consumption, linked to cardiovascular damage in the published nutritional literature. The people stockpiling gallon jugs of vegetable oil in their basements are storing a product that will go bad on a timeline measured in months, not years. Coconut oil and ghee are the two storage fats that actually hold up. Coconut oil in a sealed jar can hold quality for 2 to 5 years. Ghee, which is clarified butter with the milk solids removed, can hold for several years at room temperature and decades frozen. Olive oil falls in between, holding about 2 years in dark glass before flavor degrades, though the nutritional damage starts earlier. If you want stored fat that will be there when you need it, the gallon jug of vegetable oil is the wrong answer. Buy coconut oil in glass, buy ghee in sealed jars, and accept that fat storage is a 5-year problem, rotated continuously, not a 3-0-year problem solved once. Number 7, the 7th item is iodized table salt. I need you to listen carefully because almost every preparedness guide on the internet tells you that salt stores forever. The part they leave out is the difference between salt and iodized salt. Sodium chloride itself, pure salt, is geologically stable. It will outlast you and your grandchildren. But the potassium iodide added to iodized table salt, the additive that has prevented goiter. Iodine deficiency disorders in the American population since the 1920s does not store forever. It sublimates. It evaporates out of the crystal over time. The rate accelerates with exposure to moisture, light, and air. Published research from food science departments including work referenced in WHO guidance on salt iodization programs, shows measurable iodine loss within 1 to 2 years of packaging and substantial loss within 5 years, even in sealed containers. So here is what almost nobody in the preparedness world is talking about. The buckets of iodized salt sitting in American basements right now, bought 5 and 10, 15 years ago, against the day they would be needed, no longer contain meaningful iodine. The salt is still salt. It will season your food, it will preserve your meat, but the public health function, it was performing the function that eliminated goiter from American children in the 20th century, is gone. In a scenario where the commercial food system breaks down, where iodized bread, iodized dairy, and the trace iodine in commercial produce all become harder to access. The people relying on their salt stockpile for iodine intake will be the first generation since the 1920s to face widespread iodine deficiency in this country. This is why I told you to wait for this one, because everything else on this list is a storage and rotation problem. This one is a nutritional problem that hides inside something everyone assumed was permanent. The historical echo is real and specific. In the years before mandatory iodization, the goiter belt across the Great Lakes, the upper Midwest, produced rates of iodine deficiency in children that the Public Health Service documented in alarming detail. The iodization program ended that. A failed storage assumption could quietly reopen it. Here is what you do this week. Go to your pantry, find every container of iodized salt you own, check the date. If it is more than 2 years past the packaging date, assume the iodine is significantly degraded. For long-term storage, buy potassium iodide tablets sold for emergency use, store them separately, learn the correct supplemental dose, which is small and well documented in public health literature. For cooking salt, keep a rotating supply of iodized table salt that you replace every 12 to 18 months. Store bulk non-iodized salt, kosher or sea salt, separately for preservation and barter. The salt and the iodine are two different storage problems, and you need to solve both. I have walked you through 7 items. 4 of them will fail the people who are counting on them in ways that mainstream coverage has not explained. The industry selling the buckets has no reason to clarify. The story under the story is that the preparedness model most American households are running on was built for a product catalog, not for a working pantry. The gap between those two things is where the failure lives. If you are the kind of person who would rather know the uncomfortable truth about what is sitting in your basement, then keep believing the comfortable label on the bag. You already know what to do this weekend. Go look, check the dates, read the storage conditions, find out what you actually have. Tell me in the comments which of these 7 hit closest to your own pantry. Was it the rice, the beans, the flour, the pasta, the sugar, the oil, or the salt? I read every answer, and the patterns in your replies shape what I track next. If you want to keep walking these aisles with me, subscribe. There is a small group of people who follow this work because they would rather see the story coming than hear about it after. The next dispatch is about a specific shift happening right now in American egg production that almost nobody outside the industry is talking about. Once you see it, the price tags in the dairy aisle will never look the same. Check your salt first. That is the one that will not wait.